name's Kieran and I am the Autistic Advocate. You are on my blog. Welcome. Today I'm going to talk to you about diagnosis. Not adult diagnosis, but diagnosis if you have a child that you suspect to be autistic. This may be useful for you even if you are currently going through the process of diagnosis, or equally, like I said, if you suspect your child might be autistic. I'm going to give you some hints and tips really and talk a little bit about stuff. I am 38 years old and I was diagnosed autistic at the age of 23, and I have 3 children. The eldest of whom, Quinn, is coming up 9 and he's diagnosed autistic. I have Albie, who is non-autistic or neurotypical as autistic people say, and I have Olivia, who is just turned 5 and she is currently at the beginning of her diagnostic process. I'm also married to Michelle and she's my lovely wife, and together we make up a very unique, diverse little family. If you are an adult who suspects that you are autistic and you are watching this, or if you know an adult who suspects that they may be autistic, then I'm not leaving you out. If you check out the blog beneath, I will link to another article that I've written called An Autistic Diagnosis, and it is about me being diagnosed as an adult, what I went through, my experiences, and also what I've learnt from other autistic people and how those experiences related to mine. So it's been pretty well received. I know of several groups that are supportive of autistic adults that have it as their pinned post. So go and check it out. It may be useful for you. I hope it will be. It may not. But today we're going to talk about child diagnosis, and this can be a pretty daunting time for a lot of people. When we went through diagnosis with Quinn, it was daunting in the sense that I had never been through the diagnostic process with a child before, but the actual outcome wasn't daunting to me. I knew that Quinn was autistic when he was born. Quinn grew up as he did. Quinn displayed autistic traits. Quinn displayed different behaviours. So we ventured into the KIERAN'S process, and we stayed in the KIERAN'S process for a very, very long time. Quinn was in the system from the age of 3 because we were having behavioural problems with him, quite severe behavioural problems with him, and so he was in the system from the age of 3, and he got his diagnosis in beginning of May 2017. So he was in the system 5 years, I would say, from start to finish, give or take. And the actual diagnostic process was around 2.5 years when they started actually diagnosing him all the way through to the end. 2.5 years. So it was a long time. We've lived the experience from beginning to end. And also I have supported lots of parents through that process, given advice, been an ear for them. And yeah, pretty much. So I've kind of seen it from a lot of different viewpoints, seen it from up and down the country, in other countries as well. Tip number 1 is know what you're talking about. If you suspect that your child might be autistic, learn about it. Learn about autism. That's the most obvious thing to do. If you have an inkling, or or even you might have a little bit of knowledge, but foreknowledge, and you get flashes of things that make you think, maybe, go and learn about it. Don't put traits on your children, but learn to look for the traits, learn to recognise them. And if you see certain patterns of behaviour that you recognise as autistic from your educating yourself, then you are a little bit forearmed and a little bit forewarned, because the process usually is that you go to your GP or you self-refer to CAMHS, and they are going to ask you basically lots of things about your child. So the 2 main sources for this are other parents of autistic children, who obviously can recognise traits and may have been through the process or are going through the process, so they can have a really good support network there. And the other group of people that you should be learning from are autistic people. Now, to me, that's a no-brainer. If you think that your child might be autistic, go and talk to autistic people. But the amount of parents that don't think of this, it's crackers, absolutely crackers. You know, it's, you have a wealth of knowledge, you have a bank of information about autism from lived experience. Go and access it, go and find out, go and see if autistic people recognise the traits that you are seeing in your child. You know, that's a really sensible thing to me, and it can be a really big boon. It can be, it can justify what you're thinking. Number 2, be prepared. When you go to CAMS, they will ask you lots of questions about your child from the year dot. In actual fact, they will go before your child. They will go into you as an adult and pregnancy and family situation, pre-child, and then they will go into the child from birth, all the milestones, everything up to whatever age your child is, basically. So you need a wealth of evidence. And now, if you've gone and done what I suggested in tip 1, which is educate yourself, you will see how that evidence relates to your child. Okay, so whether it supports an autism diagnosis or whether it doesn't support an autism diagnosis. So that evidence is really important. When we started with Olivia, which was actually several months ago, and through the paediatrician, although she was at school at the time, she was pre-5, so we went down the paediatrician route, and we walked into the paediatrician's office with a wedge of observations, traits that we had recognised in her, family history, everything, a wodge of it. So we kind of preempted every question that we were going to be asked. Now, what that did was not only make the paediatrician's life easier, it also showed that we had been thinking about this. It also showed that we knew what we were talking about. And that's a really key thing, because what you will find from some professionals is that you will, and not every professional, this is a, you know, hashtag not all professionals, you will find that a lot of professionals are the experts. We know what we're talking about. And you, as a parent, are naive, ignorant, not in a bad way, but, you know, just lacking the knowledge that you need in order to be able to say what you think and say what you need to think. And also, you'll probably be a bit intimidated because this is an experience that you've never felt before. This is an experience you've never gone through. So, big bank of evidence. Use what I suggested in point 1, learn about autism and use that to look at your child and see what you recognise. And then you can go to your paediatrician, you can go to CAMS, and you can say, this is what I have observed. Okay, this is my family history. This is everything you need to know about us. Here you go. Go and make a decision as to whether you start off the process or not. Tip number 3, if your child is accepted onto the diagnostic pathway, be patient. It will take a long time. I have supported parents who have had to wait around a year. I have supported parents who have had to wait 4 or 5 years. Yeah, 4 or 5 years. It varies around the country. In the UK, where you are in the rest of the world, I don't know how it works, unless obviously I speak to a person specific in that country. But in the UK, wherever you are in the country, it varies. County Durham, where I live, the waiting list is, the waiting process for diagnosis is 2 to 2.5 years. So, but yeah, I might go into Gateshead, which is just down the road, but is a different borough, and it might be 1.5 years. All depends on the NHS service that's in the area, how much money they've got, how big their list is, all sorts of different things. So you need to be patient. It is a waiting game. There will be long periods between appointments. And of course, throughout that time, you will get no support. Nothing. No support at all. Yeah, pretty bad, isn't it? Really, you've stumbled across this autism thing for the first time in your life. You knew a little bit about it. You'd watch Rain Man, and then, you you've got an inkling that this is what is going on, and then you've been put on the pathway, which sort of reaffirms that, there's definitely something going on there, because, professionals have recognised it and have put you on that pathway, but there's no support, nothing. And you can wait 2.5 years for a diagnosis, no support. What I would recommend is continue your education, especially, obviously, you've been put on the pathway for a reason. A professional has recognised that there are traits which present as autistic traits. There are other conditions which also present with similar traits to autism. So, but you've been put on that pathway. So use that time to continue your education. Use that time to talk to autistic people, read autistic blogs, read books written by autistic people, and talk to other parents as well. And keep learning, and keep learning about your child. Talk to your child, look at your child. If your child cannot talk, if your child is what is professionally termed non-verbal, which some autistic people call pre-verbal, or if your child is perhaps selectively mute, then they can communicate in a billion different ways. They don't need to speak. They don't need for words to come out of their mouth. Okay, I have a wonderful friend called Christine, who writes a blog called The Life of Riley, and her son Riley is pre-verbal. And he communicates in the most amazing ways. You will know that from your child. You will be able to communicate with your child. You, more than anyone, will be able to understand your child. And that is what is important. Look at your child. Listen to your child. See your child. Learn from your child. They are talking to you with everything that they do, except sometimes they don't use words. Number 4, if your child gets a diagnosis, welcome to the family. You will walk out of that diagnostician's room. They will say to you, your child is autistic. They will probably hand you some pieces of paper. One of them will be the National Autistic Society. One of them may be, if you're lucky, a local charity. One of them might be a bit of paper with some local support groups, whatever. That's it. You're out the door. Bye. See you later. There's no support. There is no support. There is no support for autistic children in this country. There is no support for autistic adults in this country. There is nothing. Some people, very lucky people in certain areas, there are things, groups, proper professional support for autistic children, but for the most part, there is nothing. You will walk out of that door with your child. They are now, well, they've always been autistic, but you now officially know that they are autistic, and that's it. Off you go. See you later. So it is up to you. You are your child's best advocate. Okay? You know your child better than anyone. How are you going to support your child? Well, you have all this education now because you followed my other points. See? And if you have all this education, you know that the best places that you can go to get support for you and your child are other parents and autistic people. Seek the support of positive parents of children who are autistic. Seek the support of positive, autism positive, autistic people. And there are autistic people that may know about themselves as an autistic person but have never really engaged with other autistic people, and so don't have a wealth of knowledge, if that makes sense. So seek out positive autistic people. Seek out positive parents of autistic kids. Okay, because there are so many parents that they hate their kids' autism. They see that autism is a separate thing from their child, because an important thing to know is that if you are autistic from your feet all the way up to the top of your head and everywhere, inside and out. You perceive the world in an autistic way. You hear in an autistic way. You process information in an autistic way. You live your life autistically. Everything about you as an autistic person is autism. Now, a lot of parents do not like to hear that. I don't want my child to be defined by autism. Well, I'm sorry, your child's autistic. Of course they're defined by autism. In the same way that if they're white, they are defined by being white. If they're gay, they're defined by being gay. We are all defined by lots of things. For an autistic person, we are defined by autism because this is how we are. This is how we communicate. This is how we see the world. This is how we process. Like I've just said, everything about autistic people is autism. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because autism is great. It really is. There are comorbids which make life really difficult for us, okay? But they are not autism. There are lots of things that are comorbids that are negative, that are attached to autism, but they are not autism itself. There are lots of things that are comorbids that are negative, that are attached to autism, but they are not autism itself. Number 5, you know your child better than anyone, okay? You know what your child can cope with, what they can't cope with, and especially if you become a person who is positive about autism, positive about their autistic child, then go with your gut. Your gut will tell you that you are doing the right thing or the wrong thing, okay? Now, one of those things which your gut should tell you is a wrong thing is seeking to change your child. Do not change them. Don't allow them to get put into therapies which will change their behaviours or modify their behaviours. Autistic kids develop at a very, very different rate to non-autistic children. Okay, if you have a baby, okay, they give you this little. Sometimes it's a red book, sometimes it's a yellow book. I don't know what colour it is now, and in it has milestones. And what age does your child do this, and this is the range that they should be doing it. And none of this works for autistic kids because our brains are progressing and are focusing on the things that our brain needs. It's all about being patient. Now, lots of people, it's a huge thing in America, put their child into therapy after therapy after therapy after therapy after therapy. All you are doing is cramming information and techniques and stuff into the autistic child when that child is not ready to have those techniques or learn to do those things. Give them the time that they need. The most important thing that you can do is let your child be themselves and support them to be autistic. Support them not to cover up being autistic. We call it masking. Masking kills autistic people. We spend our whole lives pretending not to be autistic. We learn it naturally. It's amazing. As a child, we start, because our brains, it's got so much going on in them, they recognise that we are different from other children. So our brain goes into defensive mode. It starts to observe and it watches and it says, right, well then we'll cover up this behaviour because that makes us stand out, and then we cover up this behaviour because that makes us stand out, and we do this because this makes us fit in. So, and all of this is like a mask that we pull down over ourselves. When your child begins to do that, it's a very, very difficult thing to unteach them. This is why I always say, if your child wants to stim, if they want to flap their hands, if they want to jig around, whatever, they make noises, if they sing, if they echolalia, whatever they do to stim, that stimming is a self-regulation. It is a way of allowing excess energy and gives our brain something to focus on that allows them to process the extraneous information that we need to de-stress from. So, encourage them not to cover up their stims, encourage them to be autistic. If they cover up being autistic, if they mask, the mask gets heavier and thicker, and as time goes on it gets even more heavier still and thicker, and it's harder to throw off and harder to throw off. And what we are doing is suppressing behaviour. We're squashing it down inside us, so it gets to a point where we can't cope anymore. We crash. And that's what we call burnout. And we might have lots of mini burnouts. You'll recognise them in your child. And they do an activity, they can't cope with it, they need recovery time afterwards. When we go into severe, major burnout, bang, crash. It's like, I guess it's kind of like having a mental breakdown, but it's a whole physical thing as well as being a mental thing. It's like a computer that just keeps going. It gets overheats and it crunches and it crashes. Okay, so masking does that to us, and masking is tiring. It's exhausting. It's exhausting pretending to be something that we aren't. It's exhausting covering up who we are. Okay, but the more the mask goes on, the more natural it becomes to cover up, and it gets to the point where we often don't even know we're doing it. And then people get to adult and get diagnosed as an adult, and the mask comes falling off because they've made this realization that they're autistic. They learn about it, and the stims come back, and everything autistically comes back inside them, and they're like, oh my god, what have I been doing all my life? But because they've spent their whole lives doing it, they're exhausted. It wipes us out. The two biggest killers of autistic people are suicides and heart attacks. And our range of death is roughly between 36 and 56, which is a lot younger than everybody else. And most of that is because of stress and anxiety, and because we get worn out. We wear our bodies out, we wear our minds out because we're covering up who we are. Let your child be who they are. Support them. Like I said, you are their best advocate, but teach them how to advocate for themselves. Let their voice, in whatever way it comes out, let their voice come out. And most of all, again, the most important point, learn from autistic people. Underneath the blog, I am going to include a big list, a list of autistic bloggers, and there's also on the list there are books written by autistic people as well, and it is a mix, the books and the blogs, of shared experiences, lived experience, and academics as well, because there are autistic academics. There are some wonderful and very, very clever autistic academics. So go check that out. I hope that this has been useful. And at the end of the day, you love your child and you want them to be the best that they can be. So support them in doing that. Don't encourage them to hide who they are, and don't allow them to go through therapies which will hide who they are. Thank you.